Welcome to an SFB Addict video.
Alright, SFB Addict here. It's time to do another update video. The last update video was at version 12. We are now at version 18. There have been a lot of changes, so time to update the video. Now, because of the growing size of the module, it will take about 35 to 55 seconds for the module to load from the point where you right-click and select Open. This is because of the additional graphics that are now in the module. Now, once you're actually up and playing the module, there's a couple of delays in a couple of spots, but for the most part, it's free of delays. And in the future, I hope to reduce some of the graphics so that it's not as large. What I've added in this most recent release is some SVG or scale vector graphics for people that like to play extreme zoom levels like 120% to 300%, which gives them really good quality images. But the unfortunate side effect of that is that it creates very large graphics sizes in terms of file size, and therefore the module has grown in size. I'm using a double monitor setup, so all my windows will open in the center, so I'll have to drag them over. Now, this is the new cover page for the module. And what I'll do in this video is I'll basically go through what each item in the module does. It is not a learn to play. There's another video for that. It's not a what is Vassal. There's another video for that. This is just simply going to go through each part of the Starfleet Battles Cadet module and show you what everything does. So, under the File menu, there is a feature in Preferences you should be aware of for the Auto Report Moves. Now, that previously didn't work in the previous module. It does now, so whenever you move a counter, you'll get two movement reports. One is generated from that check mark in Preferences. If you move a piece just by the mouse on the map, that's the report that you get. If you use the number pad to move a counter, you'll get the number pad movement report plus the one generated from the Preferences. But when you move a piece by the mouse, you'll only get the one from the Preferences. So you can decide whether or not you want to turn that on or shut that off. So let's go into the new menu. Now, most brand new players are not going to use the new menu. They are instead going to go in to File, and they're going to use the scenario load. Now, these scenarios were created from a previous version of the client, so they use the old version of the counters, which is perfectly playable. Now, if they want to, they can load a scenario and then swap out the old graphic counters with the new graphic counters one for one and play it with the new settings, but I haven't had the chance to go through the scenarios and update them yet. It takes a fair amount of time to do it, and it's not a straightforward procedure. Okay, so again, you've got your cover graphic. There were previous maps that were used for those scenarios, and what I did is I went back in and I renamed those maps with the size of the map, 42 by 30 for instance, for blank. But unfortunately that broke the scenario, so I had to leave the old names in here. So that's why you have duplicates of blank, same as blank, Crab Nebula, Saturn, same as Saturn, Starfield, same as Starfield. It's the same map, just one has the label as to what size it is, and I had to leave in the old map. When I get around to updating these scenarios with the new counters, I'll then go back in through here and I will delete the old maps. But anyway, let's just quickly open up a small one. So that message about chatting in the main room only, no playing games, that means you have to make a new game right here. Now you'll notice that the map is still taking some time to load, it will literally take about a minute to do that. You can verify that it's fully loaded or not by clicking on one of the items here across the top, like the counter SSDs, and if it doesn't do anything, that's because the module is still loading the map. So when you click on this button here and it does open up the drop down and you still don't have the map, then there's an issue with the map loading. And there is an issue with the map loading on some systems like Windows, where sometimes this will always remain grayed out. You can toggle the pieces window on and off, and that will kick the map in the button and suddenly it loads. It's something that only users on Windows have been experiencing. One of the drawbacks to Vassal is that sometimes the sliders open completely minimized, so always drag your sliders over to verify that it's just simply not a collapsed slider. Okay, so let's go through. We've shown you the preferences. The begin log file will literally record every mouse and keystroke that you do, and when you're done playing the game, you can end the log file, and then later on go back and load the save, and you can use this button here, which is the step forward through the log file, and it will replay the game click for click by simply clicking on this button each time, and you can re-watch or replay a game that way. The button to the left of that is the undo last move. It does work. It's sometimes a little unpredictable in its actions, so I wouldn't rely on that, or at the very least save the game before you click it. I've noticed that if somebody makes a mistake with their counter on a movement, and then instead of just simply clicking the undo button, if they hit the number pad 5 or 6 more times to try and circle the piece around and put it back where it's supposed to be, and then you do the undo button, it really messes things up. Okay, this button here simply collapses and opens up the sidebar. You really don't need this open once you're playing. So what you do to open up a new room is you type it in, hit enter, you're now in a new room. Okay, the next button over is the dice button. And on the dice button you have 1 to 10 D6 dice rolls, which is a single D6, and then you have 1 to 10 for DAC rolls. Now, this actually rolls 2 dice and adds the total together. So this can be used for the damage allocation chart, and it can also be used for weapons such as the ISC PPD and Hydran Hellbore. Next button is the public-private notes. The first 2 buttons are public. I didn't use the scenario to list the scenario rules. I used them instead in this drop down here for rules and scenarios, and you'll see why when you see them because of the size. Private only you see, and delayed tab is how you do simultaneous actions. When you click new, you must give the name a unique name, so I suggest turn impulse and stage. That way, since you only ever do turn 1 impulse 1 once, it'll always be a unique name. The information you type in here is hidden until you reveal it. When you type something in, you must save it. Once you save it, it echoes it to chat. And then you have to go back in, and then once you click reveal, it will then echo that it has been revealed. It unfortunately does not echo to chat the content of the text, so it's a good idea that when you click reveal, then you go back in, you control C to copy, you paste it into chat yourself. This button here is where you pick a side, and it's where you grab your player SSD area. So if I want to be the Federation player, I go in, I select and join the Federation as a side, and now I have access to the Federation SSD area. So if I put something in here, only I may access it, no other player may. Next one over is the how-to list. So you've got your rules and everything here. So the first one's a list of what rules are in what scenarios. This helps players that have already learned how to play the game play against players that are just learning. the learner can say I've learned up to scenario 2 or 3 or scenario 4, and this way they get a listing or an idea of what rules that player has learned. Then we have the rules and scenarios. Now it's got a drop down at the top, so all your scenarios are here. The rules for the first scenario are on the first page, and then the setup for the game you're supposed to play with those rules is on the secondary tab. The first new rules section is quite large because it's the very first time you look at it. The second and the third and the fourth onward get smaller and smaller. And eventually when you get up to scenario 13, it's basically telling you to go to StarfleetBattlesOnline.com, because that's what this module is meant to do. It's meant to teach you the game, get you up to speed, and then send you on to playing the full game. And the only place to play the full game online is really StarfleetBattlesOnline.com. Now you can play the full game using this Vassal module, which is free, but it's a little bit more clunky than using StarfleetBattlesOnline.com. And there are restrictions to this module that were placed on it by ADB when they gave permission to do it. We are only allowed to have the graphical SSDs for the Federation Heavy Cruiser, Klingon D6, D7, and the Orion Pirate. We are allowed to have all of the Cadet SSDs, and we can use a generic text XSD. Did I just say XSD? Yeah, text SSD for any of the other ships, but there cannot be a library, which means that anytime you want to use a ship with the generic text SSD, you have to input the information and then play it. There's not going to be a library that you can select from and say, I want to play this ship. You have to have a legal copy, a legal paper copy, you or your opponent, of the ship that you want to use, and then you have to manually input that information. That's if you want to play the full-scale game other than with the ones that are provided. Next one down is the robot rules. Now the robot rules occur in various scenarios throughout the module, but this listing here has them all gathered together in one place. So if you can't find an opponent, you can always use the robot rules. And then there's an update of the robot rules that was created by Glendy Faini, that you can use to play the full-scale game against yourself if you really need to, if you can't find an opponent. There is a Facebook group where you can post looking for a game against other new players, or against even me, the author of the module. I'm not a top Starfleet Battles player. If you actually look at the StarfleetBattlesOnline.com tournament rankings, I'm something like 50 out of 100 kind of thing in rankings, so pretty much an average player. Oh yeah, my handle is Les, L-E, quadruple S, on the StarfleetBattlesOnline.com. Next one down is the rules by rule number. Now, in the paper manual, it's actually here under the help section. There's an intro, vids, and web links. If you follow one of the web links, it'll take you to the StarfleetGames.com website, where you can download the paper copy, or PDF copy, of the Starfleet Battles Cadet Manual. And this is a listing of the rules that is in that booklet in rule number order. Now, the paper booklet gives you some rules, you play a scenario. Gives you a few more rules, you play a scenario. A few more rules, play a scenario. But this is sort of like a rule book that has ripped out the play a scenario part and just lists all the rules in rule number order. So if you ever want to quickly look a rule up, this is sort of like your electronic version of your rule book. Next one is a list of all the tables. It has your cloak table, weapons tables, etc. This is more of a reference than anything else. There's going to be a bunch of stuff in here. So for instance, if we go to weapons, you've actually got in here a chart for firing arcs. So when you're reading the section on firing arcs, if you need a graphical representation, you can pull this section up and here it is all for you. But as you can see, there's not just a weapons sheet, there's some information on Orions, plasma firing arcs, firing weapons, stuff for drones, etc. So there's lots of information in here. This is all reference stuff that you can look at. It is not in any way interactive, but it's here that you can read and you can look at it. Now the next couple of items down here at the bottom, these are the same weapons tables, but they are interactive. And what I mean by that is they are drag and drop. So you can grab them, drag them onto your map, or if you want to, you can drag them into your player SSD area. So you have them there for your phasers, your heavy weapons, your ancillary weapons like the ESG, shield cracker, web cracker, or web breaker, your drones, and your plasmas. And then you have your bonus scenarios. So this tells you about the scenario and the setup and everything, and you can access the games themselves through the bonus scenarios listing here. So if you click this, it opens up a map with the counters already on the map. And then the last one here is a damageable chart for or your damage chart, which are drag and droppable. So you've got your cadet damage allocation chart and your full game damage allocation chart. So what you do is you drag these onto the map or your player SSD area, and as you're rolling your damage, as you run out of a system, you can highlight it, and it highlights everything on the map as being out. So it echoed to chat, hull hit, state of gone after hit is taken. So next time you roll a 1, it hits an engine hit. If you keep rolling 1s until all your engines are gone, you then mark it gone, and then you continue on with the next stage over. So that's how the chart here works. The one for the 32 game, it works a little differently, but pretty much the same. You have 2 to 12, that means you use 2 dice to roll. The systems that are underlined get hit once, and then you move on to the next one down the row. So if I roll 3 2s in a row, I would kill a bridge, mark that off, then kill a flag bridge, mark that off, then kill a sensor, mark that off. If I rolled another 2, it would go to damage control, etc., etc. And it would keep doing that if I kept rolling nothing but 2s until I get the left warp engine. And if I kept rolling 2s, I keep hitting the left warp engine until the left warp engine itself on the SSD is completely destroyed, and then I would start marking transporters. So systems that are underlined get hit once and are gone. Things that are not underlined keep getting hit until they're completely gone. Now, this chart is a little slow. It'll probably take about 5 to 10 seconds, so I'm going to clicking now, click. So it took about 8 seconds. So it is a little slow. It's a bit of a complex chart, but it doesn't mark off just the forward halt on column 6. It marks them all off on the entire chart. So as you run out of systems, when you click the box, it'll completely mark it off. Now the ones that are underlined, of course, only mark the box that is underlined and nothing else. So if I highlight phaser, it's only the phaser that's gone. And you'll notice that it also echoes to chat. Phaser, it was an underlined hit. Laboratory gone, forward hull gone, etc. So that's how the full-scale damage allocation chart works. And then we get into the sequence of play. Now there's 3 ways of doing the sequence of play. You have a button over here where you can simply click on it and it will do an audio echo directly to your opponent.
ESG status change.
And you got the same thing for the ready, halt, and no action button. So if you have no action, the way you can tell your opponent, just click the no action button. Typically, most players nowadays are using something like Skype, so you can verbally just talk back and forth and say no action, next impulse, no action, whatever. But if you're just using just the client and no other means of communication, this will give you at least a quick way of saying no action just on a single click kind of thing, or halt to think, or ready to continue, etc. Now, the sequence of play, as I said, there's 3 ways. That was the first. The second one is with draggable sequence of play charts. So if scenario 1 to 3 uses the simple one, you just click on it and it echoes to chat, and it highlights in the section in order as you go through. And you can reverse, and you can delete it. And then you got one for the next set of scenarios. Now this says 7 through 12, but you can start using this one pretty much as soon as you start using the 16 impulse chart. Then you get the one that's pretty much the full integrated rules, and by integrated I mean it puts the movement of the ships, the shuttles, and seeking weapons and the resolving of movement damage all as one step. Where down here it's got move ships, move seeking weapons, resolve seeking weapon damage. Same thing here. Move ships, moving seeking weapons, resolve damage. It's really just one step. So this is the sequence of play. It's the way in which things are done. So you have an 8 impulse game, and then each one of those 8 impulses has all of these steps. So you start at the top, go to the bottom. When you're done the last one, you then go to the next impulse. And then you've got this method for doing the sequence of play. So you've either got the 8 impulse game, 16 impulse game, or the full game. So let's pull up the 16 impulse one. Now, the calling of the speed is part of the sequence of play. So that's why here it says advance the speed caller for movement and then return to this tool for the non-movement SOP steps. So from cloak down to web solidifies, all of those steps there are the non-movement SOP steps. So this button here, this window, is only for calling movement. And of course, calling movement is the very first sequence of play step. So the first thing you do in a turn is you do your energy allocation, you reveal your speeds, and your electronic warfare status, or whether or not you're cloaking, and then you call movement. So turn 1, impulse 1, only speed 16s move, and then you go through your sequence of play. You'll notice it's echoing to chat, and it's the same steps as here on the right. Now what you can do with this sequence of play, as opposed to the graphical one, is you can edit it. So you can go in and configure it and take off check marks for things that you're not yet using. So if you don't have a Seltorian ship in the game, you can remove the Seltorian shield cracker step. If you're not playing Tholian, you can remove the web step. If you're not playing Lyran or Wynn or Orion, you can remove the ESG step. If you're not using tractor beams, or if you're not using the Romulan cloaking device or Orion cloaking device, you can remove cloaking device, etc. with everything else. So you can narrow it down to just the steps that you are using for the current game. And if you're playing scenarios 1, 2, and 3, what I've currently got checkmarked is really all you need. And then you can save it. And then those are the only things that are brought up as you rotate through. And of course, as you complete the last SOP step, you then go back to your impulse caller and call the next impulse, and then those speeds move. So that's the second method of doing the speeds in the SOP. Now the third method is the actual speed call charts. So this is your 8 impulse game. If you got 2 ships, let's say speed 4 and speed 6, you highlight those columns, and then you click the impulses as you're going down through, and you'll notice it does echo to chat. So on impulse 2, both speed 4 and speed 6 move, and 4 and 6 are in the movements that are called. You do, of course, have to remember what your speed is. So you've got this for your 8 impulse game, you've got the similar chart for a 16 impulse game, and you got a really big similar chart for the 32 impulse game. This chart doesn't have speed 1 on it. Speed 1 will move on impulse 32. When people call out impulse 32, they don't call out all the speeds, they just simply say all speeds move, or everything moves. Now your 16 and your 8 chart do of course have it. It was a smaller chart, easier to make, and easier to fit on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. The big 32 one was pushing the edges of the page, so they left off speed column 1. Now you notice that there's only 2 columns here highlighted. Do not use clear when only a couple of items are highlighted, because it will simply flip it. The 2 that are called get cleared, and then all the other ones get marked. So actually click through your full set of impulses and then use clear. So that's your speeds. So you could use a graphical speed and you can use a graphical sequence of play, or you can use the graphical speeds and this sequence of play, or you can use the graphical speeds and your drop-down sequence of play. Your choice. Whatever you prefer. Okay, next one is the counters and SSDs. So, if you go to your SSDs, you can drag them into your SSD area. So you can put in the charts that you need or want, or you can put the charts on the map, or you can just use the reference one. But your graphical SSD can be clicked on to apply damage. And another player mentioned to me that you can clone your SSD and use one of them to simply indicate which weapons have been fired that turn and apply the damage to the other SSD. So if your entire number 2 shield has been damaged and you've got a couple of hull hits, this is the ship that you would mark it on, and this is the one over on the right where you would simply mark what weapons you have fired that turn. Don't get them confused if you're doing that. But it's one way that you can keep track of what weapons have fired. So in the drop down at the top, you'll see that you've got the listing of all of your races alphabetically. You just simply go to the race that you're using, and then inside that race you've got your various ships. And the last thing that's listed is a text generic SSD. Now, the paper booklet comes with ships for Gorn, Romulan, Hydran, Tholian, ISC, and I believe Win. So those ships do have a generic SSD, and it has got listed the systems for those ships that were included in the cadet booklet. But there are ships here, or races here, that have cadet ships that don't have a full-scale ship included. For instance, the Paladin. So there's a Paladin cadet cruiser, but when you look at the generic SSD, everything is blank. So you will have to purchase the module that has the Paladin ships, so you know what the ships are, and you can fill in the information as you want to use those ships. Or you can just make something up and create your own ship kind of thing, as long as your opponent agrees and knows what you're doing. So that's where you would get your SSDs. Now there is in here also a generic base SSD that has been specified to your race, or what weapons your race uses for the option mounts. So the Federation, it's A and B, or Photon, and then C is a drone. And you've also got a Q ship. So if you're playing one of these scenarios where a freighter is involved, one of your freighters may or may not be a Q ship, which is a ship that actually has weapons, as opposed to the regular freighters, which don't have as powerful weapons and are much more of a sitting duck. So those are your SSDs and your text SSD. And then we have counters. Now the counters can only be accessed by the person that is that race. So I am not a Gorn, so therefore I cannot grab the Gorn. Currently I'm listed as a Federation player, so I can grab the Federation counter and move the counter onto the map and use it, manipulate it, etc. And there's multiple pieces here. Now typically you can drag all this stuff out and you can put it in your player SSD area until you need them. Now, I was able to put multiple graphics on certain types of counters, but not on other types of counters. And it's the ships that I was able to put the multiple graphics on. And the T-bomb. Let's grab the T-bomb. Now, you can rotate through the graphics by hitting Alt-N, and it gives you the various graphics. And they're all PNG graphics up until the base station. So here's a star base, there's the base station. Now the next time I hit Alt-N, it's going to pull up a scalable vector graphic. And the very first time you pull up a scalable vector graphic, it's going to wait a couple seconds, 10, 15 seconds for it to actually show up. So don't be surprised when you hit Alt-N and it doesn't do anything. It is doing something, it's loading the graphic. Those graphic sizes are much bigger. I found that the T-bomb is a really big delay. It's a good 15-20 seconds, I think, before it actually shows up. So don't be surprised when you do that. Now you really don't have to use the SVG graphic, because the cartoony blue one will work. But as you noticed, when I pulled up the Federation counter for the base station, it's a much better graphic than the PNG one. So that's the PNG graphic on the left, and that is the scalable vector graphic on the right. When you zoom out to a low resolution, and the first time you zoom the map with the scalable vector graphic on the map, it'll take a couple of seconds as well. Every other zoom after that is much faster. It's just the very first time you do it, there's a bit of a delay. Now, they're both about as equally visible when you use a small zoom level. Typically, most games I find I play around 60 or 70% zoom level. And at those levels, you can make out what the pieces are, but the cartoon ones, the solid blue ones, stand out much better. They're much easier to see at the lower zoom levels. That's what they were originally invented for, or created for. But let me pull, well, I already did that, but let me zoom this into something like 300%. So as you can see, the base station that is in 804 is a much cleaner graphic, and the T-bomb looks absolutely amazing. So that's Well, you can use for a T-bomb or an NSM, or that, or the original. But I do find having the graphic for the T-bomb on the map does slow things down. The bases and the ships much less so. But anyway, here's your fuzzy base station as a PNG graphic, and here's your crystal clear base station as a scalable vector graphic. Unfortunately, it appears that when you rotate the scalable vector graphic, it becomes just as fuzzy as the PNG file. This is something I have to work on and figure out later why that happens. Now, right now, this is just a PNG that is encoded as an SVG, because I found that trying to make this graphic a PNG graphic was really bad fuzzy, but it worked out well enough as a PNG in an SVG wrapper that I'm using it for now. Later on, I hope to actually remake these graphics as true scalable vector graphics, and hopefully when I do that, when they rotate, they will not be fuzzy. I've got to test all that out and work on it and find out. But that's for the future. Now the other pieces, let me zoom back out here. The other pieces can contain information that is hidden until revealed. So the drone, for instance, it could be a single space drone or a double space drone if we're talking in terms of the full game. And you don't know unless your opponent doesn't know unless they use their labs to identify it. So there is a show data spreadsheet and there is a property sheet upon which this information can be stored. Now the show data is always publicly visible, so only put information on this that is publicly known. Now I've got it defaulted to what you see here, a type C3 drone. So when you pull up a drone, just delete off what's here and put in what you're actually putting in. Now, as I was saying, the spreadsheet is always known, but the property sheet isn't until you unmask it or reveal it. So you notice over here on the left it says masked. So what you would do is you would reveal it, and then that goes away. If we pull up the units on map, you'll see that it says on the shuttle that it's not revealed, but the drone doesn't say anything about the revealed status unless I mask it again. So let's mask it. Refresh this. Now you'll see that it says fed drone not revealed, masked. So it does have that information here in the unit. And it is this masking, unmasking feature which unfortunately is why I was not able to put multiple graphics on one counter. So when it comes to things like drones, there's a lot more of them in the drop-down. So you got different styles of drones that you can choose from. Now these ones are scalable vector graphics. Or I should say the non-cartoon blue one, all of those are scalable vector graphics, which means that when you zoom in on them, you get a nice, crisp, clear picture. And again, unfortunately, when you turn them, they get a little bit more fuzzy. Now this additional square in the background is for the masked layer. It of course disappears when you click off the piece. So you have multiple drones, multiple shuttles, and multiple plasma torpedoes that you can choose from. Currently, only the Hydran has multiple fighter images. And all the other races, if they have a fighter, it's just the cartoon. So you have that masking ability and unmasking ability on all of your subunits, your shuttles, your fighters, your drones, your T-bomb, etc. And of course they all have ECM, ECCM levels. You can click on to destroy them. So when you destroy them, it leaves some debris behind. And when you do the same thing for a ship, so in Starfleet Battles, the full game, when a ship is destroyed, it explodes, and anything at a radius of 1 takes damage. So that's what happens with the graphic. And then you can delete it afterwards, or you can leave it there. So, past the base station, or the first SVG base station, are a few other ships. Now let me put the cartoon one here. So on the right is the PNG battleship. It's a little fuzzy, but the SVG one is awesomely sharp and crisp. If I rotate both graphics, the scalable vector graphic is still a little bit more sharper than the PNG on the right. Hopefully in the future I can improve that. But for now, if we just go through these, Dreadnought, Dreadnought, Heavy Cruiser, Heavy Cruiser, you'll notice that the Heavy Cruiser here on the left, or sorry, the Heavy Battle Cruiser on the left is getting smaller. That's because with the sharper images, I felt I could actually start to scale down the other classes. And then we get to a standard Heavy Cruiser, and then we go to a Light Cruiser, and then we have the Starfleet Battles Federation Old Light Cruiser, the Texas class, and then we got War Destroyers, and the one on the right is a frigate. The one on the left here is a police cruiser, so let me deselect and catch up. There's a couple more PNG images than there are scalable vector graphics. So here on the right we have the police cruiser as a PNG, and on the left we have it as a smaller vector graphic. And the next one is the fast cruiser on the right. So there are a few more PNGs than there are scalable vector graphics, but as you saw, the scalable vector graphics are a much sharper image. Than the PNG equivalent. And you do have a conceal function on your ship. It just replaces the ship with a mask. So that's a sensor contact for tactical intelligence rules, if you get into the full game and want to start using that sort of thing. So let me just delete that. You have the ability to mark a ship as fired. You have to manually toggle it back and forth. Here's your next image. Explodes, ECM, concealed. Okay, so I've shown everything here. And then you've got your changed label. So you can do in things like Fed. This one's a DN. And you can do it counter number 1 if you want, or something like that. But what I generally use the labeling for is for putting in the speed every turn. So on turn 1, it's going speed 14. And you'll see here that it gives the name and the speed in brackets. Now, this ship doesn't have it, but the Romulans and the Orion have the ability to become invisible, which sort of like makes the counter transparent. But that's it for the ships. Oh, that was one other thing. The trailing now works. I found out why it wasn't working in the previous version. Apparently there was 2 traits that were being used to make up a ship counter, and both of them had the trail option. So whenever you were turning the trail on, you were literally turning it on, then turning it right back off again. So I removed the duplicate, and now the trails work. Now the turn mode marker and the slip markers are what are used in the regular board game to indicate where you turn and where you slip. But with the trail, you can kinda not use them, but you should kind of still use them. I'm not sure whether or not the trail thing is perfectly stable yet, because I just haven't really tried it out. But I have, at the very least, made it a little bit more stable than it was for the trails. Now, when it comes to masking, right now this is a masked counter. If I become a non-Federation player, the only thing I get is the always publicly available show data, but I don't have a property sheet. I've got access to the movement trail, the mark it moved, and the ability to change the label. Those are minor things. And because of the way the traits are built, they were going to be here. But if I go back in as a Federation player, and if I mark it as revealed, the mask is now gone on the side, and then I become a non-Federation player. Now I have access to the properties. So this is how you can reveal information when a drone or a plasma has been ID'd. Now the one thing you still don't have is the ability to delete it unless you are that actual player. So let me go back in as Fed. I'll delete the drone. Now this is a fire sheet. So I can pull up a show data, and this is hidden when it's masked. And basically it's got turn, impulse, unit firing, target, weapon, and various notes. So you can write down your fire orders on this sheet as you're playing through the game. Now you can do it for each and every time you fire and leave the counter in that hex. Right now it's masked. So what my opponent would see if I become a non-Fed player is they just see a red X or a red box. And if they right click on it, they get nothing other than change label. But if I, as a Federation player, reveal it by clicking on mask to reveal it, and now I become the non-Federation player, I don't see the red box, I see the actual white one, and I can go in and I can show the previously hidden information. So as you're playing the game, you can leave these boxes behind at the points where you did fire, if you want to have a visual history of where you were when you fired, or you can just use the one sheet and move it off to the side of the board or into your player SSD area kind of thing, and if you want to ever reveal your orders. So instead of using the public-private notes and the delayed tab, if instead you want to use this, you can write in your order, have it masked, have your opponent write in their orders, and then you both reveal them at the same time kind of thing, and then you can both look at them. It's just another option. Now there is also, in addition to that, a similar type of counter for the sequence of play. It's not very useful yet, but in the future I might be able to do some sort of automation that makes it more useful, but it's essentially the same thing. It's maskable and unmaskable, and it's a spreadsheet with information, but it's just got it listed as what the sequence of play steps are. So if you and your opponent both need to reveal something on the same step kind of thing, for instance, if you both want to reveal where you're attacking, if you both have the exact same speed 0 and the same turn mode, you can say tack left, tack right. It's hidden, you write it in, your opponent writes theirs in, then you both reveal them, and then you can both see them. So you can either do it with a graphic, or you can use it with a public-private notes kind of thing. As I said, right now it's not that useful, but in the future, hopefully I'll be able to do some sort of automation and make this much more useful, but it's there as an option. I just simply created it because I was creating the firing weapons tracking sheet at the same time. Okay, so let's quickly pull up an Orion. Now the Orion has the visibility, as I mentioned. Turns it semi-transparent. That's how you can indicate that a ship has been cloaked or not cloaked. But they also have ESG on their system. And it's a rotating graphic. So it's shift number pad. So if I hold down shift and use the number pad, I can get to the Orion blue ESGs, range 0, range 1, range 2, and range 3, and then it's the wind colors for range 3. So it's the same layer set that is used by both races. So that was cloak, that was ESG, and that's the one way of using ESG. The other way of doing the ESG is you can drag out a completely separate set from the drop down here. And if you look here, it's Alt-E, so you can rotate through. And I've given it a clear one in case you just want to bring it out and leave it on your system. You can actually leave it there as a reminder, or you can actually set your radius, and as you'll notice it's currently listed as masked, which means your opponent does not know that you've set your ESG at radius 1. And if you right click and go to show data, you can do radius 1, power 3, turn that I did this for declaration is turn 1, impulse 4. And this is hidden information. So as I'm playing it and we reach impulse 4, I can declare my ESG. I don't have to set anything else. It's still there. Just drag it onto the ship kind of thing. And the two of them should move together when you move them. That sometimes if you misalign which one is the direct up and which one's the direct up kind of thing, sometimes that doesn't work out as well. So for instance, if I were to rotate the ship and then put it in and then try and move, they'll move in opposite directions because they weren't lined up. So they have to be lined up together. And that's the thing, is you've got to make sure you've actually got them lined up, because there is no easy way to tell which one's up and which one's down here when they're like this. So it's always best to pull a fresh one, because you know this one's always up in A direction, and then you can carefully rotate it to the left 1-2 times, and now you know it's aligned, and then you can move them both together. And you can Alt-E to change the status of the radius kind of thing. And when it comes time to unmask it, you can unmask it, and then your opponent at that point is able to access the menu and do the show data kind of thing. Now, you can also set your ESG to invisible, which makes it easier to see any counters that are underneath the ESG. So that's pretty much all the starships and those items. Now when it comes to Romulan, I've created a Kestrel, an Emperor, and a Praetor counter, so that they've only got The Praetor is the new series construction. The Emperor is the old series construction. The War Eagles, Battlehawks, and the Kestrels are the Romulan Klingon hulls. So if I become Romulan first of all, I can drag it over and then do the Alt-N and go through to become whichever ship it wants to be. And you'll notice that this one's got a hexagonal base instead of the circular one. So I've done that sort of in terms of Axis and allies. The Gorn, Federation, Zinti get the round bases, the Romulans, Lyrans, Klingons get the hexagonal ones. So not just the Romulans, the Tholian also have two ship counters, the Archaeotholian and the Neotholian. So other than the ships, the next set is the generic pieces. You've got a fire, no fire, and it has the same masking, unmasking ability. So you can mask it, and then you've got action and no action you can select from, and a reset. So it's under action that you do that. So you just rotate through your graphics. And then you get an observer, weapons tracking sheet, and then you get firing arc overlays. This really doesn't get used all that much, but you can shift through it with Alt, Shift, and number pad, plus and minus. And it basically goes through your various firing arcs. Now this can be rotated. So you place it on top of the ship in the rotation where it needs to be, and you can double check your firing arcs. Now, of course, this is only really useful for the newbie player, but it's here. So if I needed to rotate this to the left, I could then drag it on top of my ship, and I could see where my left side, my right side arc is. And I can see where my right portion, my left portion, my Klingon firing arcs over Klingon, my LF, RF, R, etc., FX, RA, FA, RX. You can see where all those arcs are. And then we have an explosion graphic. And then under terrain, we've got things like asteroids, and again you can do Alt-N to change the type of asteroid or the size of the asteroid. There is only one large asteroid, but you can rotate it to make it look like different asteroids. And of course you have the original cartoony asteroid graphics that are still here. And you can change the label, you can set an ECM status, you can set properties, which is basically a notes field. So if it takes 300 points of damage or 200 points of damage to destroy this asteroid, you can set that in the notes kind of thing. And then of course you can destroy your asteroid. And you've got other types of terrain. So you've seen the debris field, and you can rotate through to a radius 1, radius 2, or radius 3 debris field. Or you can clone to make a debris field of a particular size and nature. And as terrain, these are not clickable unless you're holding down, I believe it's Alt and Shift at the same time. And then you can set an ECM level or delete it, etc. So Alt, Shift, click, and then you can do what you want with the terrain. You get the same thing with the explosion here as well. You get heat, nebula, you got moons, and again you can Alt-N to go to different graphics. And then you get planets, and again Alt-N to go to different graphics. And then you got your planet killer, which works just like a ship. And then you got your unit lists. So you've seen the one for units on map. And you've got a units list here. I'm still listed as a Romulan player, so let me become Orion. It's got more Orion units on the map than anything else currently. And then you can pull up units list. So I have units for Orion that are off map. That would be the player SSD area. And then you've got Orion only units. And then you got all units on map. So if I were to put an object in my Orion player SSD area, and then refresh it, it will list what's in my player SSD area. This is listing only the Orion units that are on the map, and this lists everything that's on the map. And you can do the same thing as any other player. Now there is one player that you don't have two entries, and that's for the civilian merchants. You do only have the merchant units off map kind of thing. The merchants are not restricted counters because they basically are freighters, and every race uses freighters. And that's all the merchant, civilian merchant listing is civilian ships, freighters. So any race can drag the merchant counters on the map, and they have full access to them. Now the one thing I didn't show you how to do is how to do an energy allocation form. And that requires the SSD. So let me quickly flip back over to being Federation. As the Federation player, I am the only one that has access to this, and your energy allocation form is basically the show data. So you fill out your spreadsheet as your energy allocation form. And you do have a scroll bar, but you have to make the window smaller before you get the scroll bar. And you'll notice that as you make the window less wide, your columns get less wide. So you have to basically make it the full width of your screen if you want the maximum width of the columns. And even then, some of the words I had to kind of abbreviate. So instead of saying phasers recharge, it's FAS recharge. Instead of battery recharge, it's BTTY recharge. Or battery used during energy allocation, or battery available. Or down below, I've got down here phaser capacitor, charged at start. If I actually drag this across my two windows, you actually get to see what a little bit of the rest of the words are. So general reinforcement, phaser capacitor. And battery used in turn or during the turn. So that's your energy allocation form. And of course you do have other things here. You can damage your ship using the right click column, and if I pull up the Federation units off map, it shows the reduced size, 50% of the SSD. No, you cannot left click to do damage, but yes, you can right click and use the menus to do damage. And then of course you got your map tools down here for zooming in, zooming out. You have the big red MV, which will toggle anything that's been marked as moved to unmoved. And it also closes your movement trails. And you've also got a sector map for the big overall map. This sometimes doesn't look that great when you first pop it up. If you move it up and down kind of thing, it sometimes will look a little better, but it's a default setting that was there with the module. I didn't make it. And then you get your ranged line of sight, which is invisible to your opponent until you let go. Once you let go, it echoes to chat. So if you're trying to do range from here to the planet kind of thing, you can get that range, and then you could sort of like do a range to something else and then let go, so you kind of distract or give false information to your opponent as to what it is you're trying to get the range to. And what that leaves is the help menu, which is kind of really where every player should start the module. So you come in here, you do your welcome and first steps, and there's a bit of a write-up on exactly that. You've got the cover sheet or cover graphic for the module. You have a version history breakdown of my personal mental breakdown, as it were. As I was making the module, what happened in each update, or what got updated in each update, going all the way back to version 1. You've got a modules note, so it's got some brief questions and answers kind of thing that people might ask. Why don't the Romulans have a light cruiser? Well, the old Series CA makes for a very good light cruiser, blah blah blah. So you got some stuff here that you can read. And then you have the intro, vids, and web links. So in here is a list to videos on YouTube. There's a list to things you can download directly from the Starfleet Games website. Now these links here are a little bit out of date. I'm going to update them and then upload the module to update this section. And earlier I had discovered that there was a minor little problem with the explosions. I had broken the explosions for the ships, so I had to fix that. So once I fixed it, it's now got the new graphic for the ship explosion. So when I update the module, I'll update the video links in that section, and this was previously broken in the first upload of 18, so those two minor things are going to be a very minor change to the re-uploaded version 18. It seems I can never do an updated version of the module, even despite 6 full days of testing it. It was only when I went to make a video on it after uploading it that I discovered that I had broken the ship explosions, because it's just this one thing that I never tested. And I had accidentally hit the delete key in the back end when my cursor was on the trait for ship explosions, so I had to rebuild that one little item. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the module, hope you enjoy playing the game, and don't forget you can go to Facebook and do a quick search for Vassal Starfleet Battles Cadet, and there is a group there where you can meet other players. Have fun.